bring the museum back to life.
You know, people sit out on the front porch hoping people will come by.
Go forth and do good.
It's insane. I have the most understanding wife in the world.
I treat everybody the same thing.
Oh, that's the other thing I love about Marietta. It's like a melting pot.
You are listening to Marietta Stories. Each week, veteran podcaster Bill Nowicki brings you the heartwarming, interesting, and fun stories from the people that make the community of Marietta, Georgia, a place to call home. Here's your host, Bill Nowicki.
Matt B. Davis grew up in Marietta, and he didn't have the best success when it came to school, but he carved a niche out, and now he runs obstacleracingmedia.com, and he's known as an expert in obstacle course racing, which wasn't even a thing a few years ago, but he's made it a thing, or helped make it a thing. I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. We've got a lot of stuff, and I actually talk quite a bit in this episode, so I think you'll like it. We talk about doing a Spartan race. I actually signed up after I met with him. We're going to do that in October. And if you want to know more about it, contact me or contact Matt B. Davis. That's at Matt B. Davis on all social media platforms. Here's my interview with Matt B. Davis. Matt B. Davis. I can't remember your obstacle racing media, but you're a Marietta, born and bred.
Well, not born.
Oh, okay.
We moved here when I was a kid, and then so my formative years, so 1981 to 90s when I graduated Wheeler High School. Then, I was still around here for a long time. My friends were all either Marietta or Roswell or Alpharetta. Then they all went to UGA, so I spent some time up there. I didn't go to school there, but I certainly drank a lot up there.
Well, now, tell me about your upbringing, because now you're big into, Tough Mudder, stuff like that.
Yeah, I was not an athlete, if that's what you're asking. Yeah, I was.
Yeah, what were you like?
Trouble?
In what way?
Dude, I was basically the same way that I am now, which is can't really tell me what to do.
Right.
Just kind of doing my own thing. But when you're young, that's not, my parents were very, I don't blame them. It's just who they are. My parents were very, you go to school, you get good grades, you don't make waves. Like they literally said, don't make waves. And I thought that's all I want to do is make waves. You know what I mean? So you go to school, you get the good job, you retire in 30 years. And I just knew that wasn't me. So I did not know what I wanted. I just knew it wasn't that sort of life. You know what I mean?
There's many things nowadays that people talk about, schools about getting you ready for a factory job.
Right.
But you're not a factory job guy.
Right. But now, as I know Bill, it's super cool to be an entrepreneur and to not go to school and, because of all these college dropouts. But I'm guessing I'm a little younger than you. But
you are. I'm 59.
Okay. All right. I'm a lot younger than you. So 40. Okay. So 49 means I'm almost 50, which when you're a kid, 50 is like 100. So what do I have to look forward to like the next 20 years? Like what's the big, do you know what the, because you feel like you've learned a lot between 29 and 49, right?
Oh my gosh. I followed, sit down, in school I was well behaved, but I was like class clown.
Okay.
So I didn't really, I didn't like it, but I kind of went along with it. And then I joined the Navy, which is very, show up, do these things. And then I ended up working a job for 30 years, and then I came here, and then I hated the job. So I hired a coach, and it's so funny. I ended up where you were as a kid. He's like, I said, well, I want to get better at my job. I can't help you with that. What I can tell you is what you should be doing. And I said, what do I do then? He goes, you'll see. Things just start happening. So we talked about podcasting, videography, storytelling, which I was in the Navy. That's all we did is tell stories, make stories and tell stories. So I just started a podcast, Submarine Sea Stories, and then that took off. And then I started this one because it's like, I love doing podcasts. And I love Marietta. Why not just start talking to people? But to answer your question, it's like you start down a path, and it, as an entrepreneur, it changes so much. I mean, I would love to hear your kind of origin story, how you got started. But did you try to fit in? Did you try to
No.
You didn't go to college?
I went to Augusta College.
I've never heard of it.
Which is now Augusta. I think it's Augusta University. You know, the same way that Kennesaw did its thing. I went to Augusta for a year because I got in, and because my friend Dave, who I hope will listen to this, Dave is Marietta born and bred.
Huh.
Because my friend Dave got in, we went to Augusta College for a semester, came back, and then went to Kennesaw on and off for like a year.
And let me ask you this question. Is it easier to sign up for college and tell people I'm in school? Is that why you did it?
Honestly,
to tell adults, yeah, I'm not a total screw up, I'm in school.
Well, it was this weird thing where, like, I thought I was supposed to, right? Except for folks like you, and I have a lot of really bright friends who, they're a lot like me, but they just fell through with it. Like, well, I guess I should get this degree to make mom happy, and I just couldn't do that. It wasn't enough for me to, like, I just couldn't do it. So, bunch of crappy jobs.
So you had good intention, like you would show up, but then it's like after a little while, it's like, this is not going to work.
Right. And so I just worked these random jobs, and I was a bit of a class clown, although I did lose to class clown to my friend Brett, which was very heartbreaking to me at the time.
And why would you say he was above you?
He was, because he was more popular than me. He wasn't funnier than me. He will admit that today. He's not funnier than me. He's a freaking lawyer now. But anyway, so, but my friend said you should do stand-up. And I was a huge fan of stand-up, okay? So my parents had Bill Cosby albums, and I listened to George Carlin, and I worshipped comedians, but I was way too scared to do it. But then I did do it once in 95.
In where?
In 95, my friend Dave, same guy, put on this show in Athens, and he said, you should just do it. And so I was like, I guess I should. And I actually had started a little notebook of jokes. So I did it once, and I was like struck like by lightning. I was like, this is amazing. This is all I want to do.
What was amazing about it? Because your first set sucks.
Usually. But if you there's a great book. There's a few books, and you'll read a lot of guys have the same experience I do, which is if half the jokes get laughs, you feel like, well, I can do this, right? And I actually had a story of seeing another friend, this kid Ward, do an open mic back when Marietta had a bunch of clubs, right? Remember in the old days? There was a Punchline. There was a bunch of different stuff. Well, no, the big one was Sandy Springs, but there was a bunch of...
I only lived here for 9 years, so I don't know the old school stuff, so you're filling me in.
So in the 80s, comedy clubs were everywhere. So there was like a Funny Bone in Roswell and Alpharetta. Like if you can imagine like basically like Starbucks in every town, you know? Not as ubiquitous as Starbucks. Anyway, I go to this open mic, and everybody sucks. And I thought, well, at least they're up there doing it. And again, I've read other comics have that story where at least this lady librarian at least is having the courage to get up in front of the people. So I should try it. So I finally do this first gig. I get laughs.
Do you remember the first joke that got a laugh or not?
No. I mean, I have it on tape somewhere, but it was whatever. It was, making fun of Michael Jackson or movies or whatever was popular in 1995.
So you hit on some of that, and you got off, you got the adrenaline rush, you're like,
it was, this
is it.
It was like, this is it, dude. So Atlanta, the boom was over at this point by the mid-90s, so we didn't have as many clubs as we once did.
Right.
And so I moved to Boston, which is where my dad lived and where I was born, actually. And it turns out Boston's a really good place to start comedy, right? So...
a lot different than the Southern culture, though.
Correct. And again, if you're listening to this, there's 20 comedy nights, and there's people starting their shows.
Right.
But again, in the 90s, you either got up at the Punchline in Sandy Springs, you waited it, so you'll appreciate this. The only way to get up was Tuesday nights or whatever it was, you sit online and you wait, and they see if they draw your number at the Punchline in Sandy Springs. And they didn't draw my number, and someone said, well, if you go to the Uptown Comedy Corner, you'll definitely get up. You might wait till 2 in the morning, but you'll definitely get up. So Uptown Comedy Corner, black club. I'm a white dude. I waited all night. And this is very formative in my story. I don't think it was the first time I went there, but the second time I went there, I did, in fact, get booed off stage.
Yeah.
And while booing off stage might kill you, I literally thought, well, if I survive that, I can survive anything.
Yeah, it's never as bad as it's in your head. But black clubs like that are rough, man. It's like the Apollo.
Right.
You don't.
In a white club, the worst that will happen is they won't laugh.
Yeah, they don't even look at
The
it.
host, this guy named Earthquake, said, like, he encouraged them. If they're not good, boo them.
Right.
And so all it takes is one to start. I moved to Boston, and I was off and running. I mean, I had, again, temp jobs, but I was doing what you're supposed to do, getting up every night, doing the thing.
Part of that is you got to learn to get out of your head, look at a crowd, react to the crowd, understand it. All these skills that you're not going to learn unless you get up and do it.
Well, it's just like anything else, though, right? Just like
It's like riding a bike or Tough Mudder
or podcasting,
or
anything. You're just you gotta earn your stripes, and so I just did it, and then I moved to LA, chased that dream for another few years, and
What
again,
was that like?
oh, dude, it was such a culture shock, because when you're if you start comedy in Atlanta or Boston or Seattle or any town, it's you and your buddies, and you're driving the open mics, and you're doing the things, but it's kind of you and your friends like against the world. Boston has a great scene, and even the biggest guys, the headliners, like you all kind of travel together, go do this crappy one-nighter in Vermont or whatever it is, and it's this little community. You go to LA, and now you're literally this is like a fact. You're fighting for stage time with, Drew Carey's going to show up. He was the biggest comic in the world at that time, and this really pretty girl in an acting class whose teacher told her to get up.
Right.
So now this is the pond you're in. And had I done the same thing I did in Boston, which is be patient, hustle, try to get up, I would have been okay, but I didn't. I was too lazy. And at the time, I was just like one of those people that's like, why is he getting all the attention?
It's interesting, too. Like, every comic, that even the Drew Careys of the world, have to get up and try new material.
Right.
They don't just go in CBS and say, I'm going to try this.
Right.
You have to go to a comedy club, so you get bumped. I did comedy up above the Strand, and I just kept I was like the second guy in line,
Right.
Third guy. I sign up, and there's already 7 names because one guy signs up 6 people.
Right.
And then I'm number 7, and then it's like, okay, I'm getting closer, and I'm working the next day. And most of these comics, they don't have anything going. I had to get up at 5. Screw it.
Do you work a straight job now? Or
Yeah. I do leadership training for the nuclear industry. But I'm also, it's funny, I'm doing podcast interviews of thought leaders
Right.
in the nuclear world. And so I'm using my skills. And it's just like that guy said, once you do the thing you're wired to do, things will happen and it'll come to you. You don't have to chase it.
So you and I should talk more, because I feel like we have a lot more in common.
It's crazy,
Because it took me this long to really find out that, like, people ask me, like, people are fascinated that I, like, actually make money doing it. Because my wife doesn't work, and, it's a struggle sometimes, and I got to feed 5 people. And people are like, so this is what you do? And I'm like, yeah. And that's actually when I kind of realize it and get to appreciate, like, I wake up every day and I get to talk to people, and it's kind of cool.
Right. It's freaking great. And I get to a point in the interview where it's like, it's out of body experience.
Right.
It feels totally different to me. And then afterwards, it's like, I know Matt B. Davis. I'll see you on the street. Hey, dude, how you doing? We'll talk, because you establish that relationship where you're listening. And anyway, so back to your story. So you're in LA, you're getting lazy. Then what happens?
So what happened was I had
It's not going to end well, I bet.
Well, it's again, it's like the path is the path. So I start doing these temp. So in Boston, I always did these straight temp jobs. You go in the morning, you're somebody's assistant. I worked for Bank of Boston. I worked all these, and what's great about those is that it reminded me I never want to do this.
Yeah, we're having a team meeting. It's like, okay.
Like basically, if you watch The Office and the movie Office Space and all those things, we had meetings like that, and it's like, are you?
Oh yeah, terrible.
Are you Zoomed for days? You just have Zoom meetings scheduled all day?
Well, kinda. It's not as bad because we do so many classes that it's not as bad as some people have it, but it's still not fun,
Yeah. So anyway,
yeah.
But I found this other job where, a friend told me.
And where are you living in LA?
Oh, just a 1-bedroom apartment in Hollywood.
Right. Okay.
I mean, like typical. Like, have you seen Swingers? And he has that really crappy studio. That was where I lived.
Yeah. Okay.
I got evicted from that place. It was $350 a month. Do you know how poor you have to be to not be able to afford $350 a month?
That's bad.
I'm sure it goes for
Was
1,000.
that your low point in terms of your?
Oh, so many low points, Bill.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
A lot of low points.
that's one of your low points, though. Yeah. But anyway, so you're.
So I got this job handing out stuff like at an event,
Oh.
like a
okay.
promotional job.
Right.
And I did this job, and it was fun, and it was actually, like, at the time, it was pretty good money. It was like $15 an hour, and most of the temp jobs were 9 or 10. And you just, hey, do you want to try the new whatever? Experiential marketing, they call it,
Right.
or what have you. And then I started doing that a lot. And then they would call me and say, hey, you seem bright. We'll pay you $2 more an hour to manage. Do you want to manage this promotion? Can you hire a couple of your friends? And I did that a few times. And honestly, I don't know what made me think of it, but I just thought, what if I was the guy that actually did, what if I was the staffing company? So
Right.
I Googled, this is true, I Googled, what does it take to get a business license? What does it take to get a tax ID? These things are all free.
Right.
I think the business license costs
Yeah.
$8,
Yeah, it's
but
not
getting an EIN is free. And the next time they called me, I said, hey, write the check to my company. And I was off. And so that was my first business. That was my first entrepreneur thing, was the staffing company.
So what's going on with your parents? Are you keeping
My
them?
parents.
No, I mean, if you think about it, they're still like, what's going to happen with Matt? But did they temporarily give up on you, or they check in with you? Where was that?
My mother would just always ask if I had health insurance. That was always her big concern. And my answer, I used to say no, and then she would beg me to get it. And so then I just started lying and saying, yes,
Yeah,
Mom, I have
okay.
health insurance. My
right.
parents are very old school that way.
It's so weird to me. They send kids to college. They don't know what they want to do with their life, but parents feel good about it. You shouldn't feel good about it. If they don't know what they're doing and they end up being a waiter afterwards, is that really where you want your kids to be?
That's, I think, the advantage for me is that me and my wife are both self-starters, and we don't believe in this, like, do good in school and your life is going to be easy.
Anyway.
Whatever they want to do, they want to do. They want to go to school? Cool, we'll pay for it, or try to.
Right.
If they don't, fine too. I mean, you're going to leave the house. I'm not
Right.
going to pay your bills,
Right.
your whole life.
Yeah,
but you know what I mean?
Interesting. So anyway, back to LA.
So
You
I start
your
the staffing company, and then before I knew it, we were making like real money. And I was like, this is cool. People ask me like about quitting stand up, and it's like I never quit. I never said
Right.
like, this is it. Just one day I woke up and I looked at my calendar, and I honestly realized I hadn't been on stage in like 6 months. And I was like, I guess I'm not a comic anymore. My wife and I met, we got married, and she was an actress and had been in LA forever. And as soon as we had our daughter, it was like, how soon can we get out of LA? Like, we don't want this life anymore. And since I'd grown up here, it was like, well, let's go to Georgia. Let's go to
And
Atlanta.
where's she from?
She's from San Francisco. And so that was not a viable, affordable option. So we came here having no clue. I hadn't lived here in like 10 years, and I had no idea what it was going to be like. But I'm so glad I came back here because I love Atlanta. I love Georgia. I wanted to raise my kids here.
But you also learned all those skills about hustling, all those things that you could apply here in this area.
I think this is where the stand-up thing helps, right? Because if you've been booed off stage,
That's
you can
pretty bad.
You can, when it comes to sell, and I would remind myself of that. You go into a pitch and you're nervous and trying to sell someone and blah blah blah. That business eventually we'll get to how it closed out, but I hated it. Like, I was making decent money, but hated it just as much as anybody hates their day job, except, people feel trapped by their day job. And like, what am I going to do? And it's like, well, you just quit and get another job. I was trapped because I have no skills, right? I hate this business that I've grown, but I'm 38 at the time and no other skills. I don't have a degree. I'm not hireable. Like, I'm fucked. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was really scared. So cut to 2012, fall of 2011, my friend said, I'm going to do this crazy Tough Mudder. I'd seen the videos. They looked really scary. And we did it. And then, again, my life was changed. I was like, well, this is really cool.
Yeah, well, explain to people what a Tough Mudder is.
Well, what's great is that in 2021, I don't have to explain it nearly as much as I did
That's
in 2012,
true.
right?
That's true.
So it's if you've probably done a Tough Mudder, a Spartan, or a Warrior Dash. And if you haven't, you've seen your friends' pictures online. They're in mud. They're jumping over things. They're going under barbed wire.
Electric sometimes.
There's electric sometimes. So doing this first race at 39, 40 years old, and I felt alive in this way I'd never felt, and starting to be around these people. Because I the way I explain to people is I was never obese or anything, but I was in shape as a softball playing dad, right? Just 40-year-old malaise of life. I started hanging out with these people, and I was like, I listened to podcasts, right? So back then, I listened to Mark Maron and This American Life. Those were like the two podcasts that I knew of and that I listened to. And again, something told me, I don't know what, but something said, you should start one. Start a podcast. So I started doing it, and I very quickly became the industry expert guy, which is the thing that nowadays they tell you to do. Right. Get a niche, be the expert in it. But I didn't know that. It's just what I did. And it's like we're talking about. That's how I found my way into what I'm doing now.
What did podcasting open up for you?
Everything.
Isn't it crazy?
It's well, again, like you've been doing it since what year?
2014.
Okay, right. So
it's been that long? Jeez. It's longer than I thought. Yeah.
I found out that it was easier to get people on the phone than I thought, right?
Right.
Who doesn't like talking about themselves?
Yeah.
Right?
It's freaking crazy.
And it turns out it is communicating with people is what I'm good at it. It's, again, I don't know what it's like for you, but it's like when people would compliment me about it, I would have a hard time taking it in.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, I would think like, well, it's just talking.
Right.
But listening to other people's shows that entertain me, I understand it. Because it's like, okay, well, if I'm in my car or on a run and I'm really enjoying this conversation, then that's what it's like for other people to listen to me.
I thought you were going to say you listen to other people that don't know how to interview well.
Well, no, there's certainly plenty of those too.
But did you start editing your own podcast?
Yeah.
And that's when I started saying, man, I suck.
Well, so I started with this thing called Blog Talk Radio where you called in. And if you go back and listen now, it sounds horrible. And this is one of those lessons of telling people you don't need the best equipment, just go with what you got. Because I listen to those early shows and they sound horrible. And when you edit it, early on, it takes forever. And I still don't edit a ton. Like I don't take out ums. I just cut the beginning and the end. And if there's a big sound thing in the middle, I'll cut it out. But I'm not one of those people that, like I know there's people out there that are just like, they make it super tight. And that's just not my style.
Right. Yeah. But in terms of those skills, so it sounds like you like listening to people and talking to them, but it kind of took off. The mic enabled you to get in with them and meet all kinds of cool people. And
so at the same time I started the podcast, it kind of eventually like became a website. I'm sorry. Yeah. So I started writing articles, and then I got asked to write a book. And remember, like I'm not a good student, so to get asked to write a book was huge to me. But everything just kind of kept and then I just became that industry expert guy, and all these years later I still am. I have a lot more competition. There's a lot more podcasts out there. There's a lot more blogs. Most people don't last, as you know.
Pod fade.
They start a YouTube channel and they get really excited for somewhere between 6 and 18 months, and then it goes away. But yeah, it turns out I've gone all in, as they say, on my skill set, which is I like talking to people, and I like. I didn't do video for the first 4 years, and then I started editing those, and those became super fun. So now I do that too.
But it sounds like podcasting kind of was the transformation that you needed to really keep on going with your career, whatever it is.
Yeah, I don't know where I would be without it, honestly. Yeah. I don't know what I would be doing.
Well, and I try to explain this to people, and being almost 60, it drives me crazy with older people because they don't get it. The democratization of media was a huge change.
Right.
And the fact that I have this mic, you see, it's no big deal. It's a recorder and a couple mics and some cables, allows me to, hey, can I have an hour with the, former governor of Georgia?
Right.
It still boggles my mind. And it's at the end, it's like it's fun for them.
Right.
It's like shocking to me that you can just do that. And I'm, like I said, I work in the nuclear industry. I don't have a background in any of this. I told somebody, the good news is I'm not a journalist, but the bad news is I'm not a journalist. I know what good sounds like. Like I listen to really good interviews, and I've taken a couple classes, but it's so much fun. It's hard to explain to people.
Right.
But you got to get out of your own head. Like most people don't start, or they start and then stop. Why would you say that you just kept going? Because you didn't have a choice, or is it just, where are you in terms of your head? And
Yeah, well, there's been times, the industry that I chose, this obstacle racing industry, has had its ups and downs, and there are those times where I've lost sleep or thought, oh man,
Right.
I backed the wrong horse. I'm in
Right.
trouble.
You're thinking about pivoting and doing these things.
Right, but again, I kind of don't have a choice. I'm not really a planner. I just kind of do the next thing in front of me, which has its advantages. But I've always thought if I could have a business partner that could be a little more rational, that person that could help, but I've never found that person.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, well, that's true. So let's talk about COVID.
Okay.
That must have been a big freak out thing for you. And what's the obstacle racing industry like?
Well, I got to say, I did this weird thing, dude, where I started, it was easier, as you know, to get people on Zoom, but it's not as fun as in person, as you know, but it was easy to get a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
And so I actually was doing more interviews and putting out a lot. Some advertisers certainly kind of went away, but in many ways, for me, business-wise, COVID was the same as any year. I'm just kind of hustling and trying to figure it out. The hardest part for me was my kids being home. My kids, they're now, 14, 12, and 7, so the last year has been really horrible just to be home. I assume you have grown kids.
Oh, yeah, 30 and 28.
Yeah, lucky you.
Yeah.
COVID was not fun if you have kids in school.
Yeah, and I don't have a dog either, so that helps. But, we're in Zoom calls, and you hear a dog, there's a squirrel outside.
Right.
So everybody has to stop.
Right.
Or they mute
Well,
for a while.
it's interesting because I had actually started using Zoom for stuff.
Uh-huh.
People still were using Skype, but they wouldn't remember their password and blah, blah. And the good thing about Zoom is that now it's like everybody gets it. Right. Like it's easy to get.
Well, that's true. It was like a jump for people. It's like Zoom, here's the link. You can do it on your phone. I mean, you don't have to go through this stuff. You and I probably went through, here's how you subscribe to my podcast. It used to drive me crazy. It's like, they're not going to listen.
Right.
Why am I even spending the time showing them?
Well, and they still didn't even understand it. Like, what's an MP3? Do you have to download it? And I think that's what also has been good for me is that my sport, this obstacle racing thing, I've grown with it, and podcasting has grown with it.
So there's less of that education piece on the other end.
Right. I was going to ask you if you thought, because, we're definitely in this time of, like, every day some celebrity starts a podcast. Do you think that's eventually going to stop, or do you think the access is too easy for people?
Yeah, I don't know. What I see is the danger it's for the indie podcasters just getting started, and it's getting harder and harder to kind of position yourself. That's why I think local podcasts make a lot of sense to me, because it's such an underserved community.
Right.
No one knows local stuff. Like if I were to do a podcast about Friday night high school football, it would be popular because people.
Well, if you do a decent
crap.
job.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. But I would never do that. But there's opportunities out there that most people don't see. They see people like you and say, I want to do what he does about something else. I don't think the future is casting that huge net. I think it's going to be more localized.
Right.
There's a lot more opportunity. And then you can build your skills. And to me, like getting sponsors is not a problem because I have stats. I say evergreen.
Right.
I say you're throwing money into the newspaper.
Right.
No one reads. And when was the last time you bought something from a newspaper thing? Here's something where I do a spot for you. I mean, it's an easy pitch because I compare it to what they're spending money on now.
Right, but that's the other thing about podcasting is that early on, I would sell these packages of, website, social, and podcast, and they wouldn't even understand the podcast piece. And now it's like the first thing they ask for.
Really?
Oh, yeah, because people know the power of it.
Right.
Right? And they've heard me do an ad read for something else, and they go, oh, well, do that for me.
Oh, I see.
Kind of thing. So it's swung the other way, where people love to hear about their thing.
Yeah, and the stats bear that out, where people are spending a lot more money on podcast advertisements versus the old school.
Right.
Which is great. And I think radio, you think about it, I don't know how it's going to survive long term. Look at some of these daily news podcasts. Why not just listen to that when you when you have a minute.
Right. I tried to listen to some morning radio on the way here, and it's still awful. It was awful 30 years ago. It's awful today.
I can't have dead air. And to have a deep conversation is difficult, I think. Maybe it's not, but, I think it's much easier to fall into hey, let's make this exciting. I only have so much time to catch your attention. And you don't have to do that with podcasts. It's a beautiful thing. I look back, and I'm sure you do too, some of the interviews that you've done just go off into these directions. I was like, that's so cool.
Right.
I interviewed a guy, Nathan Martin, Go Forth Goods. He sells leather goods. All I knew was he had a cool website and he did it out of his garage. I was like, that's cool, because he doesn't have brick and mortar. He's probably making more money this way, yada, yada. So when I sat down with him, I said, how'd you get into this? And he said, well, I was dyslexic. I couldn't make it through college, so it's similar to you, but he got there in a different direction. And then he started creative company and he couldn't get paid. It was hard to get the final tweak this, pay, he's basically hard to make money, get his money that he's already spent. And he's like, screw it, I'm just gonna make stuff. But that creativity, so the problem he had was dyslexia, but it forced him to use his creative skills to build a whole different business. And he's cleared $1 million last year.
Nice.
The first time. But that to me is such a cool story. But because, your parents thought, here's the track.
Right.
This guy couldn't even follow that track. He wasn't like you trying to act out. He couldn't freaking do it because his brain didn't work.
Right.
He has trouble writing stuff. So he had to find this different path. I love those kind of stories because everybody should listen to that. Because anything that shakes up my brain and my thought process, I like. This doesn't fit my mold. What else am I thinking that doesn't work?
Right.
And I love it. I mean, it's terrific. But you have to spend that time. You have to ask good questions. You have to ask follow-up questions. And you develop those skills, and it's so much fun to me. And I bet it's great fun for you.
Yeah, I mean, and it's got to take me all over the world. I've gotten to go to these races I've been to...
Really?
Yeah, I got to go to this country, Andorra, which I didn't even know existed. I got to go to the Middle East, and I got to go to China a couple years ago. For so long, when I was a kid, I felt uncomfortable at parties if people would ask, where did you go to college? Because I didn't have an answer. And now... all my friends are like, oh, wow, you kind of cut your own path. I wish I did that, because they're in some miserable job that they don't like, and they're 50, and what am I going to do with my life? And again, it's really cool to be an entrepreneur and all that shit.
That's true.
But
Gary V.
Yeah, exactly. And I love Gary.
Yeah.
But he's definitely spawned a million horrible copycats.
I wouldn't want to do what someone else did because it's never going to work for you.
Right.
You'll like you were saying, you're burnt out. Even if you feel like it's going to work, you'll burn out. And I don't want to be there. I mean, I could be burnt out in my job. I want this to be fun. I want it to be impactful. I want to help the community. I want to do all these things, and I want to have fun doing it. And I don't want it to feel like a job.
Right. And
do you sometimes feel like you're in a job?
I honestly don't. I mean, the things that I like doing are what I do.
Right.
The only things I don't like doing are, I had to just do my taxes. That's no fun. But you can sub that out if you want. Right. When I had the staffing company, I hated all. Well, I actually enjoyed sales. I was actually I kind of do like that. But I hated everything else. I hated dealing with the client. I hated dealing with my staff. I hated everybody. So, and here's the other thing that I really learned in business, big lesson, doesn't matter how much you make, it's how much you keep. And I had these huge contracts, but with horrible margins. I was seduced by the big check, and then to get beat up by these clients left and right, and then there's no money at the end. And now, when I sell advertising, it's great because basically my work is done. It's not hard for me to do an ad read. It's not hard for me to throw an ad up on social, and I can sub that out. Whereas before, when I got paid, 80% of that money went right back out the door to pay the staff, right? The cost of goods sold, as it were. And now, everything's profit because the work itself is just my time. I'm paying for Libsyn, I'm paying for MailChimp and those things, but I'm saying I like this business model a lot more.
Joe Rogan has 2 people working on his podcast, and it's like 30 million downloads a month or something. It's crazy.
Yeah, he has Jamie and whoever else.
Yeah, it's nothing.
Right.
People don't understand. It's like they equate effort with, you got to work hard. And we do in some respects, but like you said, I think it's a perfect example of something that people fall into. It's like, I have to do these bad things too, and you don't really need to.
Right. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see, again, like what my kids end up doing because they experience their mom and me just kind of doing our thing. You know what I mean? And my wife, now my wife's been painting the last couple of years, and once in a while she sells a piece, and that's nice. But they just see people, it's not about what you say, it's your actions, right? And they've just seen people kind of make their own way. I keep meaning to say this before I forget. I have to say it because we're on the Marietta podcast. So almost any time I pull into the square here, I remember, you're not going to know this because you're newish here, but when I was in middle school, I went to East Cobb Middle School, there was a club here, okay? It was called Our Place. Please reach out to me at Matt B. Davis on Instagram or most platforms. It was like a club for underage kids. It was like they played, I want to say 80s music, but they played popular music at the time, and it was like it was like I felt cool because we got to go. And
Really?
I'm pointing towards, it's one of these buildings over here.
No way.
So anyway, whenever I come into the square, I kind of have that memories of this club.
I had to reach out to people and see if they remember that.
If they remember it's called Our Place or Our Space. Anyway.
No way. That's
yeah,
cool.
man. I mean, if you if you watch an 80s like thing, I'm like, yeah, that was my life.
Right.
You know what I mean? So like everybody thinks that their music was the best.
Right.
Do you think the music of the 70s was the best?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was great. I still listen to it. But it's funny and it goes back to what you're saying is like I had a well-worn track in my head about, okay, I show up to an organization, I follow the rules, good things will happen if I do this work and I work hard. The reality is much, much different. What I think is smart, like for most people, is I chose a direction and I felt like this didn't work for me for X, Y, and Z. So then
But you did it for like 30 years anyway.
Yeah, but I finally got to a job like I was managing people, and I remember how I struggled working for a crappy boss when I said, I can do better than them. And that's what I did. I was like, I listened to them, and I didn't take over their project. If it was their work, say, dude, this is you. I'm not going to do it for you. But I learned I could help them. So I was still within this structure. I was still doing individual kind of, it was almost like therapy or counseling sessions where I was helping people over, like, their struggles. That was fun to me, but it took me a long time to get there. But, I still got stories along the way. I had fun. Like, I'll tell you a quick one. So I was at this nuclear plant, Calvert Cliffs in Maryland, and we had advanced training on this system that we were using to test these motor operated valves, which is not important in the story. But so they sent us to Lynchburg. So I'm with all these techs that I worked with. But I had, I was in charge kind of thing, but I wasn't really. But I had like a budget, but I was the only engineer. So I'm in this thing, and we went to the Applebee's or whatever. And they say, Bill, you want a beer? I said, yeah, I'll have a beer. So I'd take a sip and I would look over and it was still full. I was like, that's funny, and I didn't put 2 and 2 together, but every time they would distract me, they would fill up my beer and I was like, aren't you going to drink your beer? I'll drink it. So by the time I left there, I was like, and they're laughing. They had the best time messing with me. And I was talking about having a hot tub party and stuff, but it got a little weird, but it was a great story. So when we went back to the shop,
Right.
I wasn't like, I was part of the shop guys now. I wasn't just this engineer. I was in a complicated nuclear plant, but I still had fun, still learned a bunch. What do you think is the future for you, Matt? Are you going to keep following this thing, or are you going to do a side hustle thing?
Well, funny enough, I do have another podcast. I told you that, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I have an Atlanta podcast,
Right.
which I haven't been able to focus on because I've been doing this one so much.
Right,
the one that makes me money.
right.
But I also have a failed podcast, which I did exactly what we talk about people do. I got really fired up. I did this documentary podcast. I got some really cool people, and I got a web. It was very cool, but then I ran out of steam after 9 episodes,
Yeah.
and it sat for a year, and I finally let the website go. But yeah, like I said, I'm not much of a planner, so I just kind of keep doing the next thing. So lately, the thing that's happening in my sport is that live streaming has gotten so easy that I've started doing that. I use this thing called StreamYard, which is great, but there's a ton of them.
Right.
But all we do is you put one of these you put your cell phone on a gimbal and you follow
Right.
these racers, and it's pro quality stuff. And you can do so much more. You can do bells and whistles with graphics, but people in our sport just love that they're getting that. So now I've been getting hired doing that. And again, it's like, what's more fun than like essentially being a sportscaster, right? Which is kind of a cool gig, right? So yeah, man, I just keep doing what's in front of me. I don't really have, I don't have a lot of long-term plans. My wife, kind of knows that's the ride that we're
Right.
on.
Yeah. Now, do you still do?
Oh yeah, like I don't really. Most of the time, I just do them for fun.
Right.
Like I'll go around with a GoPro and make some fun videos. But once in a while, I'll like try really hard. But yeah,
Right.
people think racing is racing, and for me, it's just a lot of slow jog. You know what I mean? It's just having fun with my buddies and
Well, you're
Messing
testing yourself.
yeah.
whatever.
But I'm not like
Right.
People think it's like a 5K, and it's not. It's a lot of just hanging out with my friends and, like I said, slow jog, do an obstacle, slow jog to the next one. You're
Cool.
out there for a couple hours. It's a good time.
Would you think that I could do one at 59?
Dude, we have grandmothers. We have
Really?
80. Yes.
I'm going to have to do this, Matt.
Dude, this fall, I'm not kidding, because people
Okay.
say this all the time, and they don't follow through.
I will.
I'll do one with you.
Okay.
They go out to the horse park, Conyers Horse Park. Come out this fall. Hopefully it won't be too cold. Sometimes it's really cold.
But I have to have something to shoot for. I'm like,
But you
deadline.
clearly keep fit, though, Bill.
Yeah, well, I'm getting there. Well, COVID kind of threw, but yeah, I love like cycling and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah, we'll get you out there
All
for
right,
sure.
man.
I'm not just saying that.
That's great. So how do people get a hold of you, man?
Well, I'm at Matt B. Davis on a lot of platforms. And if you're interested in obstacle racing, you can go to Obstacle Racing Media. And if you are interested in the Atlanta podcast, you can go check out theatlantapodcast.com.
Great. All right. This was super fun. I'm sorry we didn't do it sooner.
Me too.
Yeah, man. Great.
Thanks, dude.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks one more time to Matt B. Davis. Season 6 of Marietta Stories podcast is coming out. We've teamed with the Visitors Bureau to make the episodes even better. You're going to really enjoy it. So give a listen, subscribe, and tell a couple friends about the show. This is Bill Nowicki saying thanks for listening.